Okay, I'm ready when you are.
This meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. Notice of this meeting was sent to the Cape May Star and Wave in the Atlantic City Press, posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as the required notice under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public in his own file in the office of the municipal clerk. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call.
Jim Barnes,
Present.
George Dick,
Here.
John Fusco,
Here.
Allison Morgan, here. Paul Mulligan,
Here.
Kevin O'Neill is absent. Tom Richards is absent. Lisa Rosselli, here. Carol Sabo, here. Ryan Griffin,
Here.
Carol Ray Flynn is absent.
Okay, can I go right to the minutes of March 18, 2025 work session? Need a motion to approve?
Motion to approve minutes. Second.
Barnes,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Fusco,
Yes.
Morgan, Mulligan,
Yes.
Sabo,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Rosselli,
Yes. Item 6, resolution A number 0425, Mulligan 159 Stevens Street. Motion?
No. Oh, I just sent notes to Richard and others on the definition of
I didn't look at your notes, you weren't, you shouldn't. I didn't look at your notes.
well, what's the definition of construction?
You are not involved in this application as a member of the board. I'm saying if they are talking about something about it, I'm saying you're not backing this application. So it's-
So we're taking that as it stands, motion to approve.
Unless somebody has other comments on it, that's fine, I'm not.
I read it and I do not have any comments. Anyone else? I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Barnes,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Fusco,
Yes.
Morgan, yes. Mulligan,
Abstain.
Sabo,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Ray Flynn, abstain. Rosselli,
Yes. 6B, resolution number 05-25 Bolton, 109 Stimson. Need a motion to approve.
No motion to approve resolution 525.
And second, Carol? Yes.
Barnes,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Fusco,
Yes.
Morgan, Mulligan,
Yes.
Sabo,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Ray Flynn,
Yes.
Rosselli,
Yes. That would bring us to item 8, master plan reexamination recommendations from our borough engineer, Anthony Chadwell.
Thank you, Chairwoman. In front of you, you should have about a 10-page document with some of the recommendations for revisions to the zoning code that I put together. I put this together just to get your users flowing, so I can pick your brain to see how you guys wanted to shape your zoning code and tie up some loose ends, clarify some things for applicants. So hopefully you see less of the same variances where they're trying to take advantage of maybe a credit or a deduction or something that you didn't intend on allowing or something like that. So
And we specifically discussed front porches.
I'll go through this page by page if you don't.
Great.
Yeah. So the recommendations for the 2023 report, we did update building and structure definitions. And I believe we did even, address dwelling unit and accessory dwelling unit as well, since then. And we need to probably, sharpen our pencils and change up dwelling unit yet again. So that's coming up, later. Some recommendations from the 2024 report that was just sent out, in December. I believe it's April already, but revision of the lighting ordinance. We talked about dark sky approved lighting and light trespass neighboring properties, specifically in the historic district.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want to have a discussion about each of these areas as we go? I mean, just
that'd be
like,
You want us to,
verbal.
I mean,
Not you, I think
it's a 10-page report, right?
Yeah.
Should we
Yes.
go through each? You've made
Yeah.
lots of recommendations. I think rather than try to remember what came to mind on the first one, I'm just feeling like I probably won't remember. By the time we get to
Yes, I'd like to go page by page, item by item.
So, right, just
Well, items, these were just recommendations from the zone code official had some, and from the 2023 and 2024 reports. If you wanted me to dive deeper into any of these, we can. Some of these are addressed in this report.
now is the time for that.
Uh,
So that we've already updated the definitions for building and structure.
We will address dwelling and dwelling unit later in this report, so that's why I kind of skipped that one.
Okay.
We're not there yet. For the recommendations for the 2024 report, we talked about last year and the last couple of years, including some more dark sky approved lighting or light trespass, and how that pertains to specifically the historic district. You want to?
So in regards to the dark sky, you hear dark sky ordinance as all that we've discussed for many years. But I feel like dark sky is almost like a commercial reference that you see on packaging, etc. When the intent is to avoid light trespass. So rather than saying we need a dark sky ordinance, looking at specifically the ordinance addressing light trespass and does it encompass enough? Rather, but the fact that it simply doesn't say dark sky, doesn't preclude it from being an appropriate ordinance. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm just feel free to hop in and
I don't. Know more about dark sky than I do, but I thought dark sky and trespass were two very different things. I thought
okay.
trespass has to specifically impose upon the comfort of someone else, whereas dark sky is an attempt to keep the overall ambient light down so that the town is darker. So I think they're two
it wouldn't,
non-policy statement about it. But you guys can do it.
it wouldn't just be the historic district,
Right.
especially with regard to dark sky.
These, and I'm just clarifying, these are my words, I took these directly from a report. I think they were jotted down, it's just.
I jotted stuff down and I don't put enough notes on it, and then I look at it and I'm trying to figure out what I meant.
Yeah. If I can do a deep dive in the lighting ordinance, if I could, if you guys wanted me to. But the next 9 pages of this report is my deep dive into 5. Those were all 5 words. So we can just touch on these as we want to talk about them more. Or you want me to put something together?
We'll see.
What, in fact, so the term dark sky is an umbrella. There is a organization, International Dark Sky, but, and they certify light fixtures. You wouldn't necessarily be requiring that, but I would imagine most municipalities that have adopted a dark sky ordinance would probably do refer to it as dark sky. I'm guessing the city of Cape May passed one last year
Well,
probably.
do you remember, I remember, I'm not gonna ask if you remember, I remember an applicant coming, before us, and they had it may have been here or the HBC. They had a product that was, had a label of dark sky compliant, but the trespass was, I guess, because it was stood going up, but it shed a lot of light going up to the side. So, they said, well, we picked the dark sky compliant one that we were told to, but there was a problem with neighboring light, yeah. So, I don't know, I'm just, again, it's verbiage, but it's what tends to bog us down sometimes with applicants, so I just wanted to, it's not the good time to address it, so.
Cape May has a light trespass ordinance. So
Wait.
it's, no, but this is light trespass and unnecessary sky glare. And it talks about dark sky fixtures that have IBA, International Dark Sky Association seal of 317 considered meeting ordinance requirements. So they have a whole ordinance dedicated to dark sky compliant, pictures of lights that are examples of dark sky compliant lights and all that.
Yes, I was just saying, so they're saying that if you have a dark sky compliant fixture, it meets the requirements of the ordinance, but it doesn't always for us.
It might just be that part of the requirement, but it has a trespass separate. And I agree, my opinion is also that they might be under a lighting ordinance, but they are two separate issues, yes.
This phrase is light trespass and light pollution as two different things, which is sort of what I was.
Yeah.
Two separate.
I will send this ordinance to Trish, and she can forward it to the whole group, and you can all look at it for your next consideration of this if you want.
Yeah, I mean, we might end up back at the same place, but at least we'll have a comprehensive conversation.
And with regard to historic structures, I believe we've had people come that were having trouble finding the correct kind of fixtures for their home that met those. It's never worked out that. And you would think in a place with, you have a pretty strict one in such an important, burn stop or place that will control light pollution as much as possible. So are we on to?
And as I'm reading these, I think these all pertain to like specific applications that were heard. And then we're jotted down and be like, okay, how do we handle that? It comes up again. So it says reevaluate bulk requirements for side yard setbacks along broadland and sunset. I think that pertains specifically to commercial properties, not necessarily residential. There's a 6-yard each side yard setback and a total of 16 side yard setbacks in the R1, C2. Yeah, the C2 extends that to 16 each side yard and the total side yard goes up to
C2 is sunset, right?
C2 is the
C1 is
park commercial district. Yeah.
Is that the one where the commercial is 0?
I don't think any of them are 0. C1 is total 10 yard each, total 20. C2 is the park, and that is similar to the R1, is 6 each and 16 total. The C3 is the sunset commercials, which pertains to here. Oh yeah, that's the minimum 0, maximum 4.
I
So
remember we had a 0. There was a maximum for it was the black.
the total side yard setbacks 0, so they have to actually come in for a variance because they didn't have.
Is it more than 4?
They were more than 4
I've
feet.
never heard of that before, but it was an attempt at the time they were trying to make a storefront like that, a siege store, which doesn't exist over there. That's the one I revisit.
This requirement kind of jams all of the structures closer. You want it within 0 to 4 feet of the neighboring properties. Otherwise, the commercial is going to have to come and require a bulk C variance. How do you guys want that district to look?
I have a comment. I think if there's any section of whether it be Broadway or Sunset that has the potential to accommodate parking, it would be the Sunset section of it. There's still vacant commercial ground for potential for development. And if we're gonna take that away from them, then it eliminates the ability, well, no, because that structure has to be there, right? So then,
You can't really fit a driveway between 0 to 4 feet. Cars
Yeah.
not make that.
so then what's the
That seems,
minimum width for a driveway? 8 feet?
Yeah, between 8 to 10 feet.
Doesn't that seem more like a walkable cityscape kind of,
It's getting there.
well, I mean,
that was
the ordinance,
years
actually,
ago.
not the, not the actual area, right? I mean, I understand that, but
That's what it sounds like. Was the intent to try to be like Washington?
long, I guess.
No, just have an accessible, walkable area again. I mean, again, this is coming back in fact, but you know, to have that vision for a downtown area. It's, I think we have more Art Boulevard than we do on Sunset. But
And then the problem became, flood elevation for your first floor. So new, I think the first property we could see on Sunset Boulevard was exit 0, that needed to be 4.5 feet off sidewalk level. So the idea of having, a sidewalk level facade, you know, that they were running against each other, with the requirement for flood elevation taking priority over the desire for construction over zoning. Yeah.
So, sorry, just to be clear, the question, the current requirement is that it should be 4 or less.
Right now, it has to be, if they don't want to come in for a variance, so it has to be between 0 to 4 feet of each lot line. Which, yeah,
The building structure itself.
yeah, so if we go right up against it, then we need a variance, but if they're trying to stay in the middle and provide some parking or something.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be.
Right.
Um,
You cover that further.
Yeah.
That's just, sorry, oh, person. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting the first thing.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
The accessory structure in the front yards, this was, I remember this being specifically a garage on a corner where there was essentially 2 fronts. I believe it was on Brown Street where the garage actually fronted Brown. So there's not necessarily accessory allowed in the front yard, but if the principal structure faced the, I guess, pit, so it was technically a side yard, and so we would need to clarify accessory structures allowed in front yards, so that something like an undersized lot like this, where they really don't have a rear yard to put accessory structure, they would have to come in front of, I believe you got variance to allow it in that corner. Comments, questions?
So I would it makes sense to kind of keep that there.
Yep, I agree.
And then if they come in for a variance, the board votes on it.
Yeah.
Common sense, but yeah.
yeah, I think too, it'll come up periodically when you've got development on alleyways.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I think they should still come in by the board for those specific
Yeah.
asks, instead of changing the ordinance to accommodate.
yeah.
Definition of two-family dwellings, duplexes, we've talked about this ad nauseam, and we will dive deep into that, so I'm just going to skip over this, AKA breezeway style connection, so, or attachment. We'll do away with that soon. Variance analysis for the R1 district, two-family dwellings, accessory apartments. So we've redefined accessory apartments, we're just talking about what we wanted to allow, as permitted uses in the R1 district zones.
Is that accessory apartments and accessory dwelling?
Accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
Are
So we're gonna use the word apartment at all, is the recommendation to,
probably strike apartment and just accessory dwelling unit.
I mean, I feel like the less incarnations of the same thing
Yes,
are better.
so I would say two-family dwellings, a duplex, or accessory out apartments dwelling units are. I know accessory dwelling units are not allowed in R1 or any zone. And duplexes are allowed in R1.
Discuss this again.
Okay, I'll wait till you get to page 11. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know our uses for duplexes specifically in every zone. It should just be noted that accessory dwelling units are not allowed in any zone. Duplexes are allowed, so we'll get there. Last one for this is principal uses on a single lot. Do you want to touch on
No,
that? With that?
I defer.
Well, I think this came up, more so Lisa has
Yeah.
had a thing for a while. It's more so turning the garage into like a
Accessory dwelling unit.
habitable space, and then if there's two principal structures.
I believe it was a commercial use of a garage by a builder on a residential lot. And I didn't, this is where I wrote down two principal uses and then it just went, but it was, I believe it was, what's your street?
Now is 5 Landis. If it was Landis,
It was Landis, and it was a commercial use, someone was renting someone's garage for commercial use in a residential district.
that was subdivided from the existing structure. So then you had an existing garage that was being used, which structure before you have an accessory structure.
Correct.
But it was pre-existing, and I guess just there wasn't enforcement of demolition.
So there was an accessory use.
The accessory structure was the primary use. And it was commercial in a residential. Well, that's a story.
Yeah, that's not two uses, right? That's one
It
use.
was both problems. That sounds more like maybe it's an enforcement issue rather than. We didn't mention, it just said where about wherever. So, sorry.
I'm thinking of other circumstances with this. But anyway, if you want to, we'll come to it, I guess. Where's now, John? I'm trying to understand the format, so. I'm sorry.
I was very clear on, if there's two principal uses on a single lot, they definitely need a use variance. And if there is an accessory garage without a house or a commercial business that permits that accessory use, and it's just a standalone accessory, it would need, in my opinion, to come in front of the board for a use variance. There's no permanent use for this.
I know about an accessory use with no principal use, but a lot of them can't do that. I know nobody did allowance for that.
Like I said, maybe that's more of an enforcement issue rather than, something.
The only time I have challenging issues with two principal uses on a lot is when it's a commercial lot and they're putting two commercial activities on a single lot, and I'm still not 100% clear on if that's okay or not. So when you have for example, if you have a building, pick the place where the florist is. There's a florist and there's a law office. I guess it's a law office now, yeah. That's something else, artist law. I never know what to do with those. Is that two uses on a lot? I don't really know. That's the only time I get confused about it.
Yeah, certainly, there are some potential situations that could, like, where people might want to subdivide and have different uses.
That would be, the floors would be the same structure. Commercial use and a single structure, they're both commercial applications, right?
as I said, if I knew the answer, I would have said, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know because what we end up having is supposed to want to divide into 5 spaces. You want to make 5 businesses there. Is that okay? I don't know the answer to that. Like I've had that asked of me at some point, whether you could have a single commercial structure that has 6 different uses in there. You could have a nice food parlor, which is a service, and then clothing store, which is retail, or a hair dryer that's service. And you can have all these different even categories of uses in the same building. Is that okay? And when I was asked that last time, for complicated reasons, I said no, because I think that was in Cape May. The zone does have, like, one of the uses it has is a mall. And I said, well, if we want to have more than one business in a building, then that's a mall. But because people are always trying to divide those mall properties and do a restaurant in the front and a clothing store in the back and this and that. And I'm like, well, it's mayhem. There are 10 uses in one thing. So I don't have all the answers. And that's when I get in some confusion. But
So how does that commercial uses can there be? I mean, I think from my perspective on that particular property, the fact that they're both utilized is a good thing. You know, that we have 2 commercial, but, you know, again, I'm thinking specifically to that property, not in a broad spectrum of application, so.
Seems to me like given the low number of commercial spaces and the infrequency of this coming, that it probably should remain a board decision thing rather than something we try
yeah,
to.
but you only get a decision if the zoning ordinance is clear enough to say that it's not permitted.
I said, yeah,
So it may never get to you.
right.
So for that,
So if the florist says, you know what, I'm not really doing so hot as a florist, I'm gonna make half of this an ice cream parlor.
Right.
And now you've got 3 businesses there. And I don't know how that works, site plan parking, and I think fortunately, in the other situation I remember having, the 2 uses have different parking calculations. A restaurant has a different table, the other one is square footage.
Professional office.
Yeah, professional office is different. So it was a hot mess, and I just openly said, no, you can't do that. We had another one over near where that Marlin Club is. There's a building over there, that a couple of uses, and I think I say the same thing, but it's not the picture of clarity, because you always picture 2 buildings.
so for that specific building, it's in the C1 Broadway Commercial District, and both for the law office, the professional office, permanent use, and then the florist is a retail store, excluding car dealerships, service stations, or gas stations. So whether they're both permitted uses.
But the fact that it's permitted doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
That means you don't need a use factor or a not permitted use.
Yeah.
But they are 2 principal uses on a single lot. So, and they're defined differently. That's an example of 2 different categories of uses.
In the same building.
So
Um,
anyway,
to your point, getting them in front of the board, if there is a major change, or if they wanted to split it up or divide it further, or site plan approval is required when, I'll just read the section.
Yeah.
No development or any zoning, occupancy, or building permit is required for any new construction, can fall under that, enlargement, relocation, reconstruction, change in use, or for any open parking area shall take place. That would first have a site plan for such development approved pursuant to this chapter. So I think we should just need to enforce that site plan approval required more strictly to get.
Does it say about division of properties? Like it doesn't really say
It doesn't say.
construction, it says,
That'd be you're talking about a subdivision?
it's not a subdivision, but it's usually like the forest, for example, it's one structure you're putting up like.
Required for any new construction, enlargement, relocation, reconstruction, I guess that could fall under that, change in use, or for parking areas.
I don't mean to pick on that building, just when it came along.
No, I don't. Yeah.
But also the whole other thing that I've done that's happened, I think this was when you go from a artist loft to a law office, that's a change in use. So, you know, that requires site plan approval. And I've been asked this about another property. It wasn't that property, it was one up further. And different parking calculations. So, I mean, if you went from a florist to a 20-seat restaurant inside that building. And now there's a whole different parking analysis, and it's possible they don't meet the parking. That's a change in use. That's supposed to capture that. So, but in these strip things where there's 20 uses and they're always going in and out, it seems silly to require a site plan every time they have a change in use. So,
I would argue that when you're going from a retail store, tchotchke store, to a professional office, that's a lesser than use because of parking requirements.
it doesn't really between the next.
Yes, so that would trigger site plan.
Yes, but I mean, I get asked these things sometimes, and I say, well, what's the part, like, what changed? Tell me one thing that's different, like, is the parking different? And sometimes there's a parking difference, and you're like, well, then it's a change, it means something. But I mean, if someone had asked me if taking that artist loft into a law firm should come for the board for a site plan, I probably would have said no. I might have been wrong, but I probably would have said no. Just because the parking, nobody asked me, but the parking is, but if someone takes, but I have these examples where suppose that became an ice cream parlor.
Yeah, here's.
Okay, and now it's cars pulling in and out, and we kind of did the parking lot thing with the florist, but now it's a change of use. Now, is there sufficient parking for an ice cream parlor that generates high volume traffic? I had those all over the two communities, and I do think it's a change in use, and it's different. I think what I said last time was if it affects something to do with the site, then it needs site plan approval. So, when that change in use affects ingress or egress or parking, suppose it was before we had another bite of that apple on that building. It was the old parking lot where there wasn't like handicap designation. It was a hot mess everywhere. And now they're putting an ice cream parlor in there with kids and people going in and out. You're going to want to get a hold of that on site plan and get it organized in a way that's safe. And pull up, balances, those things are that, you know what I mean? You don't want to do stuff. So you kind of want to.
I was thinking of my office is a strip behind most sign goes here. So every time someone moves out, someone moves in, like that just seems.
It's silliness. I agree with you. I don't, but
They're really like.
they're very similar uses going on.
Like if you say, the uses that are clumped together and they're kind of a little volume versus uses that are clumped together that are high volume, like restaurants. That's there's no way to like. Because if I moved out and another professional wants to put in, it's not going to be changing volume. So it's weird to.
I understand. That's why one of the things that go in there is, consider saying something to the effect of existing structures with multiple uses, multiple units, doesn't need site plan approval for change of use unless it impacts site plan considerations.
There's always an component of site plan, so it's all not less expensive. It's stuff, but it's that they don't need a site
I
plan.
just feel like it's like that's renting out space. It's like.
I understand. I'm saying, look, I'm pointing out this, it is a gap, and I do get asked those questions, once a year.
Can I get a process check here? This is a great discussion, and all these things that were identified by Tony from the plan, all things that we probably need to review in detail. However, it's kind of a zoning discussion that's outside the master plan's examination, unless we're gonna say, here's the general thought process for the master plan, and these things fit under it. Well, this is just a whole separate document that we're just changing the zone. I mean, are we going to talk about the generalities of the master plan so we can flow into this? We had this discussion at our building commissioners meetings last week about duplexes. And we basically said, we need to clarify all our rules on what duplexes, what types of duplexes we can have, what's the definition of duplexes, but we said that we need to do the master plan and see how that fits into our thought process from a general standpoint, and then get to the specifics. So, I mean, I think we can work on this, but this is completely outside of the master plan, and, looking at the agenda, it's coming under the master plan, so it's almost a separate discussion. So,
So the majority of you definitely want the master plan to align with you, so.
right, so you do your master plan and then make sure all these things align with it, and just we fall out and we get a discussion as part of the master plan, or do we go through the minutia of this at a very detailed level prior to going through the agenda?
So I'd say a lot of on the next 9 pages, a lot of it pertains to the master plan, but it's not all exclusively to the master plan. Like the issue with the number 1 on the next page, it really pertains to the master plan. It's kind of just clean up. But a lot of these do pertain.
I don't care where, I'm going down the agenda, you're talking about 2 principal uses in a single lot, and I was bringing up instances where that was.
No, it's not a,
So,
I just wanna understand how, like I said, we can just do this without this. This is the whole other discussion based on the.
I think- I
Okay.
actually think, though, that we need to immediately address this duplex issue, not with regard to the master plan, but with regard to the definition. That's something I believe you said we have the worst definition you've ever seen.
no,
West Cape
I
May.
take it back, I retract it.
You found the worst.
It has no definition of, yours is at least an attempt.
Well, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing.
But I actually think we need to have a clear definition of a duplex.
Yeah.
Very quick.
First spaces on single lot, obviously. Recommendations from the zoning code official, I know we brought this up on this board separately, but he was talking about changing Little Myrtle to an R1 district instead of a C3, as most of the existing properties along that district don't meet the R1 standard, so similar to who needs a site plan if they're just moving out, if they want to do something that's permitted in the R1, because it's like a little undersized residential lot, they pretty much have to come in front of the board if they want to do anything on their property. So he's talking about possibly grandfathering in the C3 standards, similar to R4 or 5. I mean, it's no all too well by this point, to minimize all those variances. Thoughts?
I think if you're gonna do that, you need to map the two corners. So that they stay C3. We don't want, I mean, we've just had a discussion about trying to encourage a business. You wouldn't want to make, Key West Stockholm on one end and, C, wouldn't want to make it too difficult to be in those kind of businesses. So if this were adopted, you'd want the map to identify the two ends of that lot to stay commercial.
Well, you just want the bookends to stay commercial and then the middle residential to
Well,
be
can you
grandfathered.
imagine someone in the middle of block 1 with commercial business?
Well, that was the dream, but it's been 20 years.
I mean, to George's point on this one, I mean, this to me there's a very clear section in the master plan discussion. Discussions, changes on certain areas. So
This would fall out of the discussion on the.
sorry, Paul, on this, oh, yeah, yes. Yeah, so I guess, I mean, that's my way of saying. It's perhaps we part that one into that, because there's gonna be many other discussions in that about how we're going to do this, and then there's more priority, this is one thing that could be done, but the other thing could be focusing on, sunset thing or focusing on park or. So, I don't know, let's make my recommendation. My recommendation is that concept gets, earmarked, we have a note on it, we put it in the.
And not only are those 2 bookend properties you're talking about, there's also, the other instance store on.
So that little variance down the pads, on the creek.
So,
So I guess my point is, it's probably
and
a
again,
larger discussion that's harder.
you remember, sure, it's this board remembers us trying to encourage a developer to have a business and a commercial entity. Well, our deputies don't. But like you said, Paul, we've been dreaming about it for 20 years. You know, if it's something we want to abandon, that idea, I don't know. I really, these kind of decisions will impact whether we become people. And because the more we chip away at the commercial district, the less, the less we have any diversity in our identity. And, look back on the history of West Cape May and we had a diverse offering of businesses. And I, for one, am not ready to lose that. So,
Well, and that's good, but again, in this block, the individual lots are quite small. And I guess the thought that the entire block could be flipped from residential to, commercial, other than the use of eminent domain, that's just would never ever happen. So, so treating the core of the block as residential instead of commercial probably makes sense, but still mapping. And I do think this is April, we need to be in the minutia if we're gonna get this done on time.
and you know, in terms of, hearing the zoning officials' recommendation, and I understand the reason why, but I feel like there are so few properties there that I don't mind seeing them come before this board if they need to do something, because I just feel like we have to pay attention to those details at this point. That's, again, just my opinion, but, I'm gonna weigh in on that because, and again, I don't think we're gonna have a rush for commercial development, but, they are small, there's a lot of impact. I remember when, the person came in to, as a, gazebo in the back, et cetera, a little move on those properties has a big impact on your neighbors, so,
So this is the block that created the need for FAR.
yeah. You're entirely right, so.
So the C3 Sunset Commercial District, I'll just read the purpose. I was asked to read this. So purpose of this district is to encourage a high-density critical mass of commercial uses, preferably retail, leading to high pedestrian traffic. Regulations in this district recognize the importance of building form for a successful downtown. Purpose of allowing residential and professional offices above the ground floor is to increase the viability of the property by creating continuous activity. Residential units above the commercial also provide a realistic opportunity for affordable housing. That
Came in late. Yeah. So we should, that's a great idea.
good on. Yeah, I received another request since I did this report. Central Park Farm, which is currently zoned residential and has essentially, I guess, is assessed as a farm currently, was requesting.
No, it's not.
It's not a success.
No, it's
Sandy. Well, he's requesting to change the C2, similar to the antique store at the corner, and that whole strip mall, steroids and everything. Along Park, across the street, it's residential, it's currently zoned residential. So if we're looking at the master plan and, rezoning any areas, that's when it'd be that upgrade.
From what, I'm sorry,
Central Park Farm,
from what, what?
we wanted to,
I think that's that property's a unique situation. There's a lot of moving parts, whether outside agency considerations for the property as well, so, we probably shouldn't apply broad stroke.
I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just giving,
Okay,
you might be receiving an email or a letter.
I fully expect that, so.
Okay, now on page 2.
Sure.
So number one's pretty straightforward. Currently, you know, where in the ordinance, our variances, have an expiration date. So essentially you can come in front of the board, get a variance 5 or 10 years ago, and then, come back and, institute that variance, right, that you received from however long ago. I included City of Cape May and Wildwood Crest because they handled it a little differently. And I also wanted to note that major subdivisions or NDS and municipal land use law are protected up to 3 years. Minor subdivisions are protected for 2 years. They have expirations built in.
So they do, subdivisions and site plans do expire after 2
They
years.
have limits. They need to be, submitted to the county if their subdivisions in a certain amount of time, and then site plans need to have some kind of construction started at a certain time.
So regardless of what we would do, that 40 is covered.
Those are covered in your municipal land use law for you.
Okay.
Variances,
I'm not sure about that. No. I just had a decision, the appellate division on this issue.
Fair.
So subdivision, the protections that are discussed in the MLUL that expire are protections from changes in the ordinance.
Okay.
But if the ordinance doesn't change, those that's forever.
Okay.
So if you get a site plan approval, actually, that's the one I litigated, was the site plan approval 2 years. In Cape May, a site plan actually, that approval expires after 2 years. And the lawsuit was about whether that expiration, whether you can really do that. And the answer is yes. So here's the point. If you have an approval, a major site plan or a site plan approval, and the law changes, a year and a half or a year and a half into it, there's a change in the uses permitted or whatever. That change in the ordinance doesn't affect that approved site plan for 2 years. They're protected. But if the law doesn't change, you could have something built many years down the line that was approved many years ago that wouldn't be approved today. Example, in Cape May on Washington Street, just right near the Washington Inn restaurant, there's a big building. They made it kind of nice, but it's like a 20-unit thing with a thing behind it. And it got approved 7 years ago or 8 years ago. And the Permit Extension Act, all this stuff lasted forever. It's like 10 years or something. In reaction to that, that's why they have this thing now. It doesn't just protect changes from changes in the ordinance, but it actually expires if you don't pull a construction permit after a certain period of time in Cape May. So it sort of overlays that thing. So even if there's no change in the law, it makes it expire. Now, there's some complications about whether they can move to extend it for a third year and all that. It's a very complex thing that Judge Pulley and I worked out. But so that is, if you're going to do this expiration concept, you want to think about it applying to approvals beyond those variances. And you can do it, right?
So a site plan subdivision, a variance.
So the city of Cape May, as Rich touched on, the variance expired from construction specifically does not commence within a period of 2 years. Wildwood Crest I included because it handles it a little differently. It starts the clock 3 years of the date of the board's approving resolution.
So if construction doesn't commence, does that mean you pulled your construction permit, or does that mean you have a shovel in the ground?
I said shovel on the ground, so I would interpret that.
Very clear.
Does a construction permit, is that a 1 year?
I think.
I thought construction permits had an expiration date to be able to start.
Yeah, it's 1 year.
Yeah. So now you're bumping into the 4th year, yeah. depending
It
on,
might just be more straightforward rather than complicating with construction star, hey, variance site plan, whatever you want to put limits on. Expire within whatever you guys approve. It's 3 years or 2 years or 5 years, whatever kind of you guys deem fit. I think that's a lot more clear. If you want to give them an extra year or so, instead of the 2 years, you give them 3 years before approval to get their ducks in a row.
Particular date of resolution.
Did you notice that PMA has a right to extend it?
I don't
Not a
know.
right, but an opportunity to extend that.
Lower
They
common
can
law.
give us extension, I don't know if they can.
saying that lower does, extension. Yeah, it's not gonna take it.
Saying you vote into the resolution, so there's an expiration.
So there was an application more recently and, in the resolution, it stated, that the gentleman had 2 years to take care of a particular thing on the property. If he wasn't able to do that in 2 years, then there was other consequences, but it was 2 years from the date of the resolution, that was specified in.
You know, that was different though.
Yeah.
That's because they have two principal uses on a single lot, speaking of the devil. Right? Wasn't that the one with the camper in the back? So that would, we cut them a break and said, listen, you have an illegal use, you gotta get rid of that. in 2 years. Which they did.
No,
That's not a case, but they're all.
I think that the way, I mean, even just saying how quickly things have changed from the last time that we're doing master plan, is the world really change happens. Necessary, but an end date stuff. Revamp if we need to, if they have.
yeah, necessitate a fresh look and, you know, their needs may change as well. Which might be why they haven't, addressed it in 2 years, so. That too, I like being consistent, because I think less mistakes are made that way. 2 years expiration sounds reasonable to someone financing a job or something like that.
2 years from the date of the board's approval, I think it should be more clear than that.
Yeah,
I like that.
it's usually a resolution,
I was like-
I think resolution.
Would be the right.
Yeah, from the resolution being approved. 2 years from the resolution being approved, or 2 years from the board's.
I'm only pausing, I'm wondering if it's the publication of the resolution.
Yeah, I'm thinking that. That's
So
what
are you
I'm
doing just for variances or for site plans? And
all of it. That's
so
what.
then there's a complicating factor, but I'll deal with it.
Okay.
In the MLUL, you're allowed to apply for an extension of the 2 years. And you can even apply for, you can get a 1-year extension. You get 3 1-year extensions. The quirk in the MLUL, I don't know why they did it this way, is that you can apply for that 2-year extension after the 2 years. And it goes back to when it expired. It goes for a year. So if it expired on December 1st, 2025, you could apply for that in March 2026. Even though your 2 years has gone by, and it relates back to when it would have expired and runs 2 years. So when you have this expiration thing, you can't make it shorter than the MLUL, so you have to allow it to relate back. And language that it kind of worked, we got away with it, but I can do it a little better, so I'll make it so that you're in compliance with the MLUL. It's a decision written by Judge Sutton's how it. So
And if it's clear as mud, and there's a lot involved with all of this stuff, so the MLUL is literally this section. All the case law and findings and everything is 2, 3, 4 times as much. Just trying to explain all of these nuances and issues to the MLUL, so. It's ordinances, legalese, MLUL, it's all inherently.
Well, I know what you want to do, and I'll make it so that it works.
So number one's good. You're good with site plans, subdivisions, variances.
Yes.
All right, number
So,
two,
excuse me, so a subdivision would, if not built on, would those new lot lines go away?
No, subdivision was special case, I'm moving past that. Subdivisions have a different thing. You have to, they're telling them that you have to file the plot within a certain period of time. It's like, you know, I forget, it's like 6 months or a year from the first minor and a certain other time, but I'm not even, I know subdivisions are a special.
Because
case,
I'm
but not
hearing
the-
subdivision.
Well, you don't get a construction permit for subdivision. That's why it's not really what you're talking about. I know.
So that, it would have to be,
As remember, I said site plans, we said, well, that's
Yeah.
gonna be no site plans. So the variances, it's.
Number two, front porch credits have been misinterpreted by applicants as if they may deduct the entire gross floor area credit, no matter the size of the porch. So we see these undersized porches in the R1 and R2 zones specifically. And then the applicant tries to take the full deduction, even if the front porch is say, 100 square feet. They're trying to take 200 or 400 square feet away from their gross floor area ratio, and essentially they're putting a larger habitable area, bedroom, or a larger living room or something off the back of the house. So we've seen this, you know, a handful of times since I've been serving you guys, and we just need to clarify that, so we're not in front of you guys discussing if these calculations of gross floor area, so that their professionals can read the pertinent sections of the ordinance, interpret it the same way that I'm gonna interpret it, and we all have the same calculations at the meeting. So I can revise this to be very specific. I don't know if you guys want to change it. I know we talked about changing it to possibly a ratio of the building as opposed to just a deduction of square footage.
you know, with the size and scale of the houses that are being built now, the intention of this was to encourage front porches, because for so many reasons that I don't need to explain to anybody. And it didn't work. Sadly, it didn't work. So I think ideally, I'd like to encourage front porches, but I think any of these adjustments are misused, and with the density and scale of the houses that are being built, even if they put a little porch on it, it's dwarfed by anything else that's built. So, again.
So we should take away the permits for front porch. Credits.
I think with
The credits.
The credits, sorry.
Yeah, the credit, we don't get a credit for it.
So it's limited. So we're
But
just,
I don't want, okay, but in the conversation that went in here, I would like to encourage front porches, so. I don't think the credits given have resulted in the intention of that ordinance change, you know, it didn't work the way the ordinance was intended. So,
basically people are throwing a little landing on, then linking that area into their
so if we scratched it and said,
front porches are encouraged.
but is there some way to codify an encouragement of a front porch?
Isn't it already encouraged by not including it in their floor ratio analysis?
That's how it's.
Yes.
You're already getting kind of outside overhead covered space that doesn't count for your floor ratio. I mean, it's that I thought was the incentive of doing a porch.
Front porches are good incentive. Because it's they're nice, one thing, yeah.
are we, so you mentioned that there have been some, I think you said people are misinterpreting it. Is that to say that people are coming, they're building a 50 square foot front porch? They come in and they say, well, I got a front porch, it meets the requirements, take 200 off.
Yeah.
And that is,
That I never.
that is rejected.
I would have my better.
Right.
Our engineers Okay. Just try to, like, clarify for their professionals, so there's no misinterpretation that, hey, you can't deduct more porch space than the porch space that you're proposing. Only be that proposed porch space
Right.
up to, you're getting that credit for deduction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, thinking aloud here, but it feels like if that's clarified, so there's maybe no people who are just trying to
It's some.
use it, get around, get some extra space. And it also then stops us wasting time on that whole discussion right there. Then it would have value of staying here because then we continue to encourage a front porch for the reasons that we just heard. Right. They're gonna,
Would you add some additional verbiage like 50% of front porch that is over 50% of the front elevation length?
that I think could further, yeah,
Then you get receive this credit.
I think that, I like that idea. So clarify that it has to be all front porch and do that. But then also basically, so this is a huge house that's extremely wide and they get 200 square feet is not that big a thing. It's sort of like a little mud room. That's also not what's being encouraged. So we want to add in something else that necessitates that it covers a certain percentage of the front of the house.
Talking at least 50%, needs to be along the front.
I haven't thought about, I haven't thought about the number, but
That's our zone.
I think you could take a stab at writing this the way that it would be clear for.
I would
Okay.
express proposed front porch space.
Okay.
That's.
So I would do away with the.
Just use the microphone. Thank you.
I'll do away with its, credit with the porch and its design standards. So if you're gonna design a house, it must be designed with front porch, period. Why?
How's that
I
going?
mean, we have design standards on houses that are, like, side by side duplexes, they can't be the same. There's gotta be a bump in the wall after, I think, 30 or 40 feet. So they're design standards, so you could put the porch in the design standards and just do away with it.
Do we have many design standards for single residential homes?
No, but we can put it in.
Yeah.
So we would eliminate a lot of these issues.
Or it could introduce, if somebody doesn't want a porch, then they're coming to the board to ask for no, for a variance to not have front porch.
Tough one, Norm.
And then you also the impact.
Well, it's like, it's, I mean, we do have the design standards, which we can go by. And, Tony's right, I mean, these people are putting up 4x4 landings, you can't give them a chair on it, they want the 200 square feet, and it's just ridiculous.
You want the carrot or you want the stick? That's.
but that's the whole aim of the.
I was thinking too, just going back to the original thoughts of the master plan and we've always been talking about how to reduce overdevelopment and land coverage and all these things around we do it legally, maybe not super complicated. I think we should probably not be giving people anything back at this point. And I actually agree with Norman, it's West DMA, don't live here if you don't want a porch. Like, this is the community, this is what it's supposed to be like, we're supposed to foster a sense of community. You wanna build a vinyl box where you can't see your neighbors, go offshore, find somewhere else. I think at this point, being a little strict isn't.
I got mine in the stand.
Well, and,
Cause there's some monstrosity that we've all seen.
well, and the thing is, that if they're within the bulk requirements, then we have a conversation sooner or later about the bulk requirements. Do we wanna reduce them. So, I mean,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Well, the case in point is that duplex across the street. There's nothing, that should have a front porch. They should have porches. It's concrete. And you enter into a cubicle.
Yeah.
The design on it's terrible. But this way, you have control. It's gotta have a front porch. A front porch would do that, plays wonders over there.
Are you aware of any town that has actually mandated front porches for all residential structures?
No, this was just
No.
just an idea that, if you're gonna, eliminate the extra 200 square feet and you want porches, put it in the design standards. Doesn't have to be a giant porch, I mean, it's something, 8x8 or 8x10 or whatever. Something to get a chair and a table.
Yes.
Yeah, let's look at it.
I would like to venue.
I know.
That's a car wash.
Sounds like the board's divided.
It's a car wash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe just to try to, maybe we're divided on the extent of that possibility but it doesn't seem like we're divided on the need to at least clarify that you can only deduct 200 if it is a front porch of 200 feet. Right, and maybe does anybody else have any comment about the 50% or the X%, as in like sort of, yeah, I don't, 50% actually does seem maybe a little low, I guess. I don't.
I think Alice's point is spot on about, we don't need to be giving anybody any credit for that. They're big enough. They're big enough, even with a tiny porch, and they're taking it just to add another bedroom or whatever, it's too much. That's been the crux of the conversation for how many years now, this overdevelopment when it's people developing properties they own, so it's a rightful development. But when you put those properties start lining up and they've maxed it and taken an extra 200 feet, then it feels like the scale is overwhelming. And that's what we're trying to notch back, and it has to be done by hard numbers. So if it's done by the bulk requirements of lot coverage, then that's something that was attempted a couple years back and didn't come past this board. So yeah, so we'll get to that.
But as it pertains to the master plan, you guys still want to encourage front porch construction.
What if you did it alternatively, instead of interior square footage, give the ability to potentially increase lot coverage for maybe more outdoor living instead of
A
interior
lot
living?
coverage deduction instead of a habitable space gross floor area.
Keeps the houses smaller,
That's all, when you're covering more lot coverage.
the house is smaller.
Lot coverage is just.
For your
Yeah.
patio.
That's not gonna.
Accessory building.
Well, we're required to have our drainage calculations for any new development or substantial renovations, so that covers that portion of it.
Not that change. So
That way you're incentivizing front porches, but you're not including interior square footage as a reward.
Yeah, it does seem like we need to think somewhere along those lines, because if it's struck, and I do agree with what you both said, then we do solve one issue. I mean, we're addressing one, but the main thing that we're trying to do is encourage, at least in this discussion, is encourage front porches, but it's not there anymore.
Well, I feel like we've tried to encourage front porches by giving this credit.
Right.
It hasn't
It
worked.
doesn't work, yeah, so it needs,
Because people don't, are sort of, they still take them out. So even if we give incentives in other ways, I
Okay,
feel like
I
the
see.
sign for incentives might be done. That it might just be like, this is the building standard. We're going to do a new development in West Haven.
In the R1, R2.
Right.
Or where you got the front porches.
Cause you know, then you're still covering more ground if we get an exterior,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's a different version, yeah.
And then we're still getting away from our original complaints and why we wanted to get into the master plan with it, you know, in terms of overdevelopment and these giant properties on small lots, like that's not gonna help that situation, just like that.
But if we come out of this whole process and we just incentivize more lot coverage, with due respect, that's, I won't say about it. I'm just saying, but I am just one person, so.
Question in the driveway.
No papers.
That front.
It's,
Yeah, it's.
my general understanding is that land use doesn't regulate architecture. That is why historic commissions and making regulate architecture. Now, I'm sure that there is this fuzzy area where there's the height of the building up, this and that, but generally the size and location of things are what you can regulate, but you can't say, well, you need to have dormers. And we like dormers, you have to have dormers in every house. So it's anything to do that, unless you're the HPC, then you can have more designs, you know, elements, but.
Enjoy it, someone enjoy it. But that's sense.
I mean, because
So how do you address the size of the houses that are going on the line? Do we take a step and say, hey, if you tear down your house, you only get the building in footprint? And you only get it 25 feet.
Lot coverage.
I mean, lot coverage. Lot coverage is, yeah, can you do that?
So,
As it relates to.
maybe say,
Yes.
you would think if you were building a house, most people would want a porch, and it's this issue.
You know, most people are renting their houses out, they're giving, as much, as many bedrooms.
So they're
Same house that we have, and porches in a bedroom. Real simple, look at the house that.
Right,
the houses
you're
are
right,
building.
because the
They're-
house is being
Yes, and squeeze them out.
Most importantly, specifically, is, so you can still go to porch, size of the house as long as they fit, and the setbacks and lot coverage, without needing any deduction.
200 square feet gives you 2 bedrooms.
So if they do put a porch on, yeah, they can build a bigger house, essentially.
So you need to just remove the incentive.
I think incentives can go. Yeah. But it did not work. It was a good idea. It didn't work. In fact, it's far.
The question would be, to what extent are they simply encouraged, or is there some other thing somewhere else we can find or come up with that can actually proactively?
Pam, did you have something for the,
If I may,
sure. So it's been a small group, informal work session night.
Nor just put the microphone on. It's very full.
Sure, my name and address?
No.
Phone number? Thank you. I'm Betty Carter. I'm just credit card. A lot of goodwill to you. I guess I'm just a little confused because it feels tonight like you guys are trying to solve the problems of the town, and I appreciate that because they're all really valid concerns. But a master plan is an overview. It picks out what's wrong, what's right, what needs attention. And, you know, you don't have to figure out how to do that right now. That's step 2. Get your head, Rich, am I on fair ground here?
You're accurately stating the concept of the master plan, but I also thought that we were combining part of the areas of concern in the ordinance that are.
Okay, so, and my comment to that is, you get the master plan in place, you know, the vision, what you want for this town. More porches, smaller houses, the general overview. And then step 2, get your commission to hire a planning company after a wide search to find some people who deal with resort areas, deal with zoning in different places, have history with how things work and don't work. And then that discussion that you're having now with the very specifics, they can say, well, we're aware that this has been used in this is working, this doesn't work. And you can put together a zoning code that would be tailored for you instead of going, well, that one didn't stick, but that one did. And I think would make your job so much easier. And it's hard, it really is, I get it.
In the last master plan, Pete Mag, after we passed the master plan, we had an implementation committee. That's what they call it, implementation committee. And then you take the master plan and then you start low hanging fruit and then you kind of start picking items and you start implementing. So yeah, I mean, it traditionally is a two-step plan where you come up with larger concepts and then implementation. So
Yeah,
I agree with Penny
I
on
didn't
that.
see Tony's list, but like what I'm hearing, they're all specifics, they're all issues, but they kind of fit under one umbrella. Houses are too big, there's not enough charm to them. That was why the design standards came in the last time. After the master plan was done, we had a planner that came in, that planner worked with us to help develop some of the things that instead of having straight lines and big tall walls, they have to have some design to them, design standards. So, I mean, there's so much to go over when you talk about all these little details. And I heard earlier someone was concerned about getting this done in time. You can do it. I mean, you guys know the problems. But 2 cents. Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
In fairness, you only spent 80 minutes on it. So.
Yeah, I guess I take those also, there may be some of these things that are going to be, part, maybe it's part of the master plan, maybe part of the implementation, but at the same time, master plan's due at the end of the year, and the implementation, it could be. If all of these things fall into the master plan schedule and implementation schedule, I think some of them are not gonna get addressed for years possibly. Even if they're explicitly mentioned in the master plan, yes,
Well,
they still need to be enacted.
some of
So there's,
these, some of the zoning changes that, ordinance changes that have been, discussed, we can do that. We don't have to wait for the master.
right, that's right.
plan to do that, to clarify language and,
We have to.
There are some priorities. I mean, you mentioned, right, like the duplex thing
we have.
and the front porch thing, that seem to be big
But I
priorities.
think this, again, it's not that long. I think this is a useful exercise. We're fleshing out, airing out all of the things that we've had come up as concerns through different applications. So it's a power on.
Like I said at the beginning, of the meeting, a lot of you do pertain to that plan, some of them do not, all of them pertain to the zoning code, and things that we've seen over the past year, they kind of have just been building up instead of,
So the bottom line, this is a workshop and this is the time to do it, so.
We're agreed that you want to remove incentives, square footage incentive altogether.
Is that going, so, Pam's point, if we're looking at the master plan, you want to align your zoning code with the master plan, you guys do want to encourage porches. You put that in your master plan, and then you go to delete this section that kind of,
Well, and again, there's conceptual and then there's how we actually do it is, can be another conversation. Conceptually, you can have an idea and then have it incentivized in a different way is another conversation. And I don't think we have to have all those solutions right now. So I think that point was made as well. And that's, something we didn't, put the point on the pencil to till just now. So let's think about that.
could tie into bulk requirements or FAR.
that's potential number 2. While you guys digest this, I could try to clarify this better, bring something to the next workshop, with some more clear language if we want to go that route. Just nix it. That's preferable. All right. Agreed? Speaking of porches, we do not define porch specifically, so that leaves it up to the code says any definition. Word, phrase, or term not defined in the chapter, jobs meaning or standard or common usage, so that leaves it up to, people reference NJDEP, they reference Webster's dictionary, it's like what is common standard usage, so if you want to encourage front porches, there's your time to define exactly what you want a front porch, instead of wraparound front porch, 50% of it or more is along the front, so that it can go alongside, we just would need specifically to define porch. It's very clear, so I will,
What do you suggest? Do you have a suggestion?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I was trying to think of brain to see.
Covered, screened, open,
Sitting area. Is it porch, right? I have a landing. You can't put a chair on it. Comes out of the front door. It's big enough to put a couple plants, but it's not big enough for
If
chair.
that- if that's
That's
a
not
really,
really porch.
You don't get the 200 square foot tax.
Like, would you want exact kind of dimensions, like,
No.
needed to be at least like 5 feet?
no, but like,
Well,
so,
I've been thinking of properties on Broadway that have just a concrete
a
porch.
stooch, yeah,
Yeah.
where it's just like.
Porch,
Wouldn't be able.
it's a covered area, covered areas and it's often to the roof. And we open our windows and make feature columns around. May
Awful stuff, but not
also serve as a transition area between the indoor and outdoor spaces.
Open the
Provided,
area on both sides, that's, I think that's.
open, you know,
The one problem I think we run into maybe twice, it's on the board, is with the porches, them becoming like sun porches.
Screened in or enclosed.
But it feels very much like it's just a room with a lot of windows, it's not really truly like a sun porch. And so again, kind of going back to people using these spaces, could very easily be conditioned into very, your bedroom and all these myriad of other things, so those definitions, I want to be
Porches
to the point that.
outdoor area.
Unconditioned space.
Even if it's screened, it's an outdoor area.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's fine, but if you have, you know,
And is it,
straight wall band.
and shouldn't a porch having use like a sitting area or as opposed to a landing that you just walking through? Maybe that definition transition could be a landing, but a porch is somewhere that has a bench or seats.
so I guess the relevant, point you're trying to make is that you don't have that. in the-
It's up to people, some big, big season or anything. Some porch space.
So I wasn't defining that, but. Efficient space.
Straight, bring a couple definitions.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
Would that be different?
Like that, so,
Yeah.
like that long, yeah, it would be the porch. There's a deck.
Put it down.
Sure, you can have it like that. Without.
Yeah, and it's not porches.
That's like a porch or a deck.
What's the definition of a porch?
Well, that, that's. The deck would be.
Moving right along.
Yeah, but it's been, it really isn't, I know that's, but it's, these are things we really need to have clear and. You have all these,
Seen other professionals try to argue their point by testimony. But I believe it wasn't the intent, but these loopholes that are in place to
Right.
further their clients.
So we need a definition, but not too broad a definition.
So they're covered by roof.
Unconditional. Screens.
Screen's fine.
I'll include some definitions.
That's still over there.
All right, page 3. The definition of dwelling, here we go. Touches on duplex specifically. The definition is circular, so you ask dwelling shall mean specifically duplex duplex dwelling or two-family dwelling, so it's all, okay, what is a dwelling? And you circle up dwelling shall mean. So we just need to be a little more clear with their definitions, so, I suggest defining, if you guys want us to call it duplexes, I know, Rich said they didn't have a definition for duplex, but their permitted uses, they call it a dwelling that's either semi-detached, which means it has a party wall, or two-family detached. So they technically define duplexes, but they don't have a duplex because it's not an allowed use. They just define it a little differently. I'm just going to read these so that it's out in the open. From the DEP, they explain that a duplex is a residential structure of two attached units in which the interior living space of one unit directly abuts the interior space of another unit. So that's interior living space. It's not a garage, it's not a breezeway, it's a living space. Either in a side-by-side arrangement sharing a common wall, often called a party wall, we'll get to that there, or in a lower upper unit arrangement. So, I know you guys probably don't want to see the upper stacked duplexes, if you want to see duplexes at all. So I don't think that's inappropriate.
I would like to add to that, that the units should have street frontage. Meaning, normally a duplex does, but rather than allowing creative land use that doesn't, even when you have a unit on top of a unit, they both have street frontage. And if you're on Second Avenue, you're looking at duplexes, they all have street frontage. You should have street frontage. Shack in the back is not what we should be promoting.
Two other concepts to consider that I've seen in other places. First is that they should be a relatively equal size. That's you end up with a 3,000 square foot one and then a 1,000 square foot shack at back. That's one way to defend it. We're talking about. And the other thing, and this is just my opinion, I'm not a legislator, but I think your current ordinance, I'm the only one who thinks it's kind of clear that it says containing. To me, a duplex is a single structure that has two units inside it. It's supposed to not necessarily look like a house, but kind of look like a house. It's supposed to be one building that has two units in it, not two things that kind of happen to be touching at some point somewhere along the line, or divided two big things with a little breezeway between them. It's supposed to be a building that has two units so that it kind of fits in with a single family residence neighborhood, but has the benefit of providing a more affordable alternative and more dense use. But it's not designed to look totally different than a single family residence. It's supposed to have a single family residence with two units in it. It may have two doors, it should be sometimes symmetrical, but I mean, I don't view this as being all that complicated. That's why you have duplexes mixed in with your houses. Otherwise, you have all kinds of crazy shaped stuff. It's supposed to fit in with the neighborhood. So to me, containing means a single structure. So I think it should be contained within a cohesive single structure. That's just my opinion of the duplexes. It's not a planned unit development, things scattered and touching octagons.
I know I have strongly about garages and duplex too. I don't know if that's a design standard or but forward facing garages duplex when they're designed.
They want them or don't want them.
I'll
I don't
let
want
those
them.
colleagues speak for themselves, but
I don't like it. I think if you didn't have an attached garage on a duplex, it would eliminate a lot of the confusion that we've seen over the last few months. Years.
if you have
If you did not have an attached garage,
Mhm.
if you have room for a detached garage,
Yeah.
that's different. But I think if you do not have an attached garage on a duplex, then you have your single structure. 2 units inside one.
Saying that you're essentially for a duplex, you want to require a garage?
No attached garages for duplexes.
So,
Because we saw a bunch of duplexes attached by a garage.
Yeah.
So if we eliminate attached garages for duplexes, now you have living space.
no garage for no front facing garage?
No attached garages. If you have a giant lot and you want to do a detached garage in your backyard, I don't think you should be inhibited if you have coverage. But if you don't have an attached garage, a forward facing garage, then you're not attaching by a garage.
Forward facing.
Well, just no
It's
attached
the
garage,
void.
period.
Two things over the garage.
So no garage attached to the.
Well, decide what you want them to be and what you want them to look like, and let me and Anthony work about writing it down. So what do you envision them looking like? You want them connected with anything touching? Do you want things between them? Or do you want the living spaces to actually be touching?
You know, if there's no garages in between the 2 units, then the living spaces are touching.
What if they have nice
Sometimes they
cool
have
garage?
One door.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I like the interior living spaces being the connecting pieces. Because it doesn't specifically mention the garage thing, but I think in my opinion, it would accomplish what you're saying. Because basically, it might have a garage attached or detached, but that's not gonna help create a duplex, you know, they,
The NJDEP definition does that.
yeah, it does that, right?
Interior living spaces.
If you look at a duplex, like, there are several in the borough, and one that comes to mind that's on Second Avenue, would be, you are looking at two garages that touch, but the living space wrap behind those, and then they touch behind the garages.
It's a single purpose.
Yes. But there's 2 garage bays that face the street. To have the property wide enough to want to move that somewhere else, that probably doesn't occur frequently. I don't know if you have enough room to do that very often unless it's again.
I mean, that was the discussion there. One of the commissioners, one trouble with the duplexes done on 75-foot lots. Because you basically get 2, 3, 3,500 square foot houses next to each other in half, well, 75 feet rather than 100, you would have to get 2 separate houses. And that was one of the issues. And then we looked further, there's many, many different types of duplexes that fall within our code. The question I would really ask, what are the reasons that we want duplexes? And if we do, how will we like to write the rules on in each one of those? Before we even go to what it looks like, we don't need to change definition if we say no more duplexes.
Duplexes are more affordable than single family.
Are they? I just looked on Broadway, there's 2.
Well, I know, you can always find an example, but.
I'm saying right
There are-
now,
there-
every house in this borough costs over $1 million, whether it's a duplex or it's a single family house. The only way to say that it's going to encourage affordable housing is say, if you have a duplex, you can have one, you have to make one affordable. Real simple. And I guarantee you will never get a
You'll never
duplex.
get a duplex again.
But if somebody wants to do that, so I have a hard time with the argument that it creates affordable housing.
There
Not here.
wasn't, there wasn't.
Not anymore, not anymore,
It maximizes the profit for the property.
correct.
And- Sorry, I need to.
Bad, I think, right? Like, you're back. Which I think is nice.
In a perfect world, and you have a blank slate. You can make whatever definition you want, and you can require duplexes to be triplexes, whatever, to be whatever they are, but you are not in blank slate and you have a lot of existing duplexes and larger permitted and unpermitted. So it gets hard to think about, one, eliminating them, they exist. They're here.
We're not saying,
I know.
we're saying any additional building, when we start continuing to tear down all the houses, what do we want to have happen? Having a duplex that's already in existence is grandfathered, there's no issues there. And I know you brought this up several times with me.
I know, because I beat that dead horse.
Yeah,
That horse is dead, I'm bringing it back anyway.
and
Just kidding, just kidding. So I think a lot about this. I think a lot about zoning. Ask me why, but look what exists already. Take an inventory of what's here in our duplexes and maybe work from that, because I know I've mentioned to the commissioners, I don't know if I've mentioned to you, but having my signature on a lot of things that went through over the last, or whatever it was, 17 years that I was here, and then being affected by them later, you know, what are you gonna do? And what we were trying to do was to do exactly what you're talking about, help control the growth of the town in a way that's consistent with the rural character of the town and the reason that we're mostly all here. You know, but it has costs associated with it, and you have some longtime people that have been in this town forever, and I know I've heard from some of them, you know, about some of the things that we do as a commission that affect the cost of living here. So one thing to keep in mind. Smaller units are more affordable, whether or not they're affordable in West Cape May is, and they're not, everything's so dang expensive. But smaller units, as opposed to requiring same size units side by side or top bottom, are going to create a smaller unit that's going to demand less rent or less cost in the whole. One of the ideas that came to me recently was, what if you were to actually, if your rule about future duplexes were that they had to be of a smaller size so that it was by nature creating a little bit more affordable unit. Maybe I just read something and I didn't look it up, it just came across my feed. The city of Key West with one of the island, what's it called? Roosevelt Island, is it? One of the islands that used to be Christmas Tree Island where you used to canoe out to and camp, became this big developed area. And when they did the zoning for that, they said, okay, for 20 years you can have duplexes, and after that, anything else is going to be, or you're going to revert to single family. So what occurred to me there was you're putting timeframes on it too. It's another tool that maybe that can be used. Planning professionals can help you with that. The detail of that, I think, could be helpful. There's got to be a lot of different methods out there. But really, the first thing in my mind is to look at what's already in existence. Get an idea how many duplexes we have, what styles of duplexes. What comes to my mind consistently, and of course I look at one every day, is the units that are put in garages. They're there. You know, you had an application recently where you wanted to make sure the height wasn't enough so that it didn't create one. Illegally, I guess was the feel, I don't know. But it does help create some affordable housing. And if variances aren't given for units that to create the extra unit, then that could help with the affordable housing obligations down the road too. I know it hasn't.
Well, because whenever that comes up, it just turns into an Airbnb. Nobody local can rent it. I mean, I haven't seen any, it's impossible to get a rental here.
I mean,
And
I happen to like those shacks in the back. You know, I happen to like those shacks in the back that Paul was saying, you know, the quirky little,
Yeah.
you know, that existed already, you know, and I wish they were available for different folks to rent.
What's there, and maybe those restrictions, like I mentioned in Key West with the timeframes, maybe they could be put on too, where, you know, you can't, rental periods. I know Monroe County, don't I have it? Monroe County, decades ago, put in 30-day rental restrictions. You couldn't rent a single family or a duplex or anything like that, other than a hotel or motel, you could rent for less than 30 days, but anything else you had to rent 30 days or more.
They have those kind of things in, leave in Montauk, and in Hawaii. You can't rent for less than a month.
Yeah,
I will say it one more time, so
Yes.
no question. I don't think that an Airbnb that has single or 2 or 3 day rentals is a residential use. I believe it is a commercial.
well, there's another good point.
That's
You
all
know,
that's my,
the
it's a
2-3-day
it's a
rentals.
transient use for overnight stays. That's the definition of a hotel.
And that's part of what creates the havoc in the communities, when the people are coming and going all the time and they're on one big party and you're living next to a commercial use in a residential zone.
They can't sit in a hotel room.
So, I mean, maybe that's another tool.
Having a police on it.
Certain amount of licenses that you can have short-term rentals and other ones have to be monthly. It's real simple, but I mean, if you wanna create affordable housing.
The police is on the
But
internet,
you-
you advertise.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was telling you.
You can Airbnb your house.
If you Airbnb your house and no one's gonna know, then you won't be Airbnb, you advertise it on the internet. So if you really wanna find them, it's not that hard. You
Okay,
just go on Airbnb.
They just bought that software, correct?
We are considering.
It's expensive. It's not 20
That's a narrow expensive, but, you know, just saying.
The calculation.
Maybe that's a narrow, anything, maybe sign one,
Yeah.
there's an add-on to their work, yeah. Just, I don't think that a variety in housing, I think a variety in housing stock is what goes along with the guidelines or restrictions, however you want to put it, of the Council on Affordable Housing. They don't want to see Mount Laurel developed there, that I want to see Avalon developed here. And actually, there's a bunch of duplexes and triplexes and multiplexes there too. But it's a different environment than we have.
Is there any way to, if someone had a property and they wanted to do a duplex, can you make them have to scale it down? You can have a duplex, it's just gonna be smaller than a single family home would be allowed to be on that same property.
Well,
I mean, do something like
in the R1 and the R2, it's 75 foot frontage lot width.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the suggestion was, you know, and again, so we have, like Pam saying, the diversity of housing stock available versus eliminating duplexes altogether versus only allowing them on a larger lot, which really, why wouldn't they
They
just?
won't, they'll just build two houses.
Yes,
They have a lot. If they have a 75 foot lot, then you don't allow that use on that lot. You can't put a duplex on a 75, you get to put a house there. I mean, I still thought
Very
205 A,
Yeah.
two 2,100 square foot houses, both almost $1.6 million. So that's not affordable housing.
In the R.
It is in Avalon.
Yeah, it's an Avalon, that's right. New York City.
We already have it built in. Reducing the family size, so, in the R1 for a single family, the maximum gross floor area, which is all the habitable spaces of all the floors, for a single family is 2,250 square feet. For a two family, it's 1,688 square feet per unit.
Okay.
So it already is scaled down if they want to two family. You have something similar in the R2 for single family, two family, 3, and even 4. Essentially keep getting scaled down,
That's
smaller, smaller, so that's already built in.
And how you can outlaw single family. I served 10 years before moving to West Cape May on the Broadway zoning board. And the governing body outlawed two-family properties. Now, if you know anything about the city of Broadway, I'd probably say 40% of all the housing stock is two-family. And as a zoning board, I mean, it was painful. Every single meeting, we would have 2, 3 applicants before us. And they would all come to the table and they would say, but my realtor said, this is a legal two-family, and you're taxing me for two-family. And we would say, would produce your resolution where the property is two-family. And it was tedious to be on that board, but what we had, the biggest problem we had in Norway was that there was many of the two families were created off book. So yeah, 20 years later, somebody buys it, the realtor says it's two-family. The municipality was taxing it as two-family, but there was never a zoning approval, or they either had to come in and show the resolution, or they had to come in and prove that the two-family occupancy predated 1963 or some date before zoning. And you know, that's the way, and it was painful to be on that board, but you could do it if you want to outlaw and new two families, you do it. And it doesn't outlaw it. It just means if somebody's got the most compelling case for a two-family, they sit at that desk and make their case. And then this board grants them relief.
It seems like kind of across the board, I believe we're all trying to curtail the overdevelopment of our town. And that includes the charm, you know, or the lack of charm with some of the new developments. Front porches, lot sizes and duplexes kind of being the crux of what the master plan revisions are trying to be. And it doesn't seem like we're actually cutting with a knife. It seems like we're kind of smoothing it out with some butter knife. Like, I think that there needs to be some real hard choices, and we're probably going to upset a few community members. But it's for the good of the whole, not the good of the few. So the good of the whole is limiting the buildable lots, limiting, putting the design standard of, yeah, you gotta have a front porch, period. Because that's what this town represents. That's it. So it's kind of cutting with a knife and skipping to the end, but that's the answer. And we're kind of tiptoeing around it, and I think we are gonna piss people off, but it is for the better good for the long term, the master plan of the community.
And eliminating short-term rentals.
Right, all of these things
Have a
that
minimum of.
we're kind of talking about, but not actually saying like, okay, let's do this. Because that's what we should be doing. We need to do with this. We've actually been talking about it for a year or more, for master planning to on, but now it's time to actually put our stamp on it. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, at this point, going back to this, talking about issue, water usage, big issue, parking, traffic, eliminating duplexes would help all those things, instead of on one lot, one family, and two families using twice as much water taking up that same one parking spaces and all that sort of thing. So, like, in my mind, with all these things that we're going through, I'm trying to take them and apply them back to what the original master plan and overall feeling of where we can get ahead and our big issues are. So I'm just kind of constantly comparing them to those projections.
And to that end, you have the RSI will say a house has to have 2 parking spots, but when a neighbor who advertises the house sleeps 20, and they'll oftentimes generate 10 couples with 10 automobiles. I mean, and Stevens Street is a little narrow parkway. so the cars are all over the lawn. They're all over vacant lots. I mean, there, I don't know whether there's a point where zoning can bring more reality to, the parking requirement, or whether that's something that maybe has to happen at the mercantile license level, that if you want a mercantile license for Sleeps 20, then you need to prove that you can park at least 4 or 5 automobiles. I mean, if you're gonna, when the mercantile license is.
Because our parking is based on bedrooms, but obviously in those, because I rent those kind of houses when I go to North Carolina. Obviously those kind of houses have alternate sleeping things, they have sofa beds in the living room, and there's a rec room with a sofa bed, and, 8 bathrooms, so it doesn't matter if you're sleeping next to the pool table, you have your own bathroom.
Or like
It's
six,
free.
like a double bunk beds and things like that, yeah.
Right, so just the 5 bedroom, 4 bath parking requirement doesn't really reflect who's gonna be in that house.
That's a minimum.
Yeah.
But again, if you're gonna be able to, if someone does, if a mercantile license should, well, I own a rental property in Lower Township. And in Lower Township, I have to declare that the property, Sleeps 6. I have to declare on that mercantile license, how many people my property, how many people I'm gonna allow to rent the property. And if I say Sleep 6, it's, Lower Township expects it to Sleep 6. So if I were to say
And parking,
Sleeps 20, then I would think it would be appropriate for Lower Township to say, all right, where are you gonna park 10 cars?
Well, it needs to stop set. We are rewriting. So
you could, you could have a sleep 6 parking for 2 cars in the rental and the mercantile thing, so that they would have to advertise, how many cars they can have with the rental, how many cars they can accommodate with the rental, not how much it sleeps, but, for both.
Well, I think it would depend on how many spaces they have in their driveway.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's constant.
Right.
That's why it's 1, 2, 1 to 2, 2, 1.
Yeah, you either would want to require adequate parking, or the applicant applying for the mercantile license can't sleep 20 if they can only park 2 automobiles.
So,
Because nobody has 6 kids anymore.
Yes.
so,
I'm getting possible.
so getting back to just this duplex thing, obviously we need a good definition, just because we already have so many duplexes, but are we actually looking at eliminating duplexes altogether in the R1 and R2? I mean, is that something?
It was something that was proposed in the board initially, and we kicked it to here.
Right.
Go through a little bit of a process, go through it and decide, okay, let's say we don't have any, or we have what we have now. I would just build it up from not having any. Why would we want to have them in each zone and write the ordinances over if we want? So start from, no, we're not having it. I mean, I can make arguments till we should have. New, not existing.
And I mean, it's still for the developer, property owner, it's a moneymaker. I mean, we had Mr. Peters sit here at the table. When we wouldn't grant him his subdivision, he shook his fist at us and told us, I'm gonna put in duplexes, I'm gonna teach you a lesson. So obviously, it's still a moneymaker.
So for tonight, should we just kind of agree and change the definitions there? And sort of back, permanently get rid of.
I would substitute, but I think.
Yeah.
You don't want to change the ordinance twice, so you want to work with what how the ordinance is going to read besides the definition. If you change the definition, then you gotta go through the whole process of publishing it, But even there to go through the whole process of changing the cost.
If you're gonna start eliminating entire uses for entire districts, that's a master plan activity. If you're gonna fix your definition of duplexes, that's something you do routine as part of your annual review. So, you're gonna start thinking, entire zones, you're gonna eliminate permitted use. That sounds like a master plan type of activity. I'm not saying you can't do it, I'm saying that's part of the master plan, but you can fix your definitions and everything. Well, I would do one up to mutual exclusive, and the DEP one is a good start, I'd like to tweak it a bit, but,
Well, because we don't wanna run up against what we've recently run up against again.
It's just, the duplex thing's a big thing, and I think rather than make like a decision tonight, it might be worth thinking about, or if Anthony, if you have any more information, and if it's a similar town that's done something, Rich, in a town that's done something like that, if there's any repercussion, then just kind of look through it a little bit.
Said, talking about the definition is something we should do.
and we're also, are we paying a master plan specialist to work with us on master plan, so we should probably discuss with him his experience of eliminating duplexes citywide and see what he says, and kind of why it's here, I'm not asking for it.
I was suggesting talk with your code people about that, how that would affect the acceptance of our code plan with the state. Might be a good idea. And along on the side, you were talking about limiting the times of rentals, I think a few minutes ago. Another thing that I've heard around town is, who builds single family homes for 20 people? Is the number of allowable people, Paul, you touched on it, the number of allowable people in a rental, is that another area that could be updated so that you're not getting 60 cars and 20 people and, that type of problem. I don't know if it's doable or not, but
When you look at other towns and their ordinances and everything, I have to say, West Cape May is a really unique place compared to those towns. We're not like any other short at all. I can't think of a town that's like that.
Yeah, we have a farm.
Yeah, I think who has a farm at the beach? Maybe, Eastern Long Island, all I can think of is the Hamptons and, Montauk. There's some stuff like that up there, but there is not a place like this I can think of.
So look, definition, being Richard work together to massage the DEP one, probably to remove the lower unit, 3 unit arrangement, if you guys want to see stacked duplexes, if you guys don't want duplexes.
And I like Rich's point about the equal size, because if we decide to keep them, I think that kind of eliminates the developers that are gonna be building a house for themselves that's larger, and then having a smaller one that's purely for renting out by Airbnb. If they're both equal size, I think that could solve some problem.
So you would want that or wouldn't want?
I'm saying if we end up keeping duplexes, that having them sort of equal size rather than having this big 4,000 square foot house.
Suite or something would be smaller size.
I don't think people are using that.
But if you can you do it then?
That first.
Dreams.
And I think if we have Rich write the definition of duplexes, it'll be one of the best ones he's ever seen.
No doubt.
Never know it all.
Yeah.
You should see West Cape May. Definitely will be talking.
So we spoke about number 4 on page 3. If we go to page 4, number 5 we already talked about, so I can just add over to Stan and Matt, and no need to see any other towns. They brush up against them, eliminating duplexes entirely, how that works with the master plan. I think we spoke about that ad nauseum. Does anybody have any questions, or just give that to the All right, next page.
So, I mean, So allowed in our code is triplexes and multiple.
Yeah, in the R
We
two.
could clearly get behind only those
Yeah, we still have an R2 triplex.
triplexes
I
and multiple.
actually think you might get more year-round rentals out of this. There's some-
Yeah, that's
Got anybody wants to build?
Working on one. Yeah, Johnny, get creative.
Yeah.
You better hurry.
No, okay, I just said it out loud. It's not- No, I said it out loud, but, you know, this is why we're having conversations. I mean, that would do.
Looking at the R two,
And again, to Pam's point, it's just, you know, we don't want to eliminate the availability of a diverse housing stock. I mean, she said it a number of times, but that's, if we do, we're ending up with a, you know, some kind of, yeah.
permitted uses in the R two is multiple dwellings having 3 or 4 dwelling units in one or more structures. I don't know what it means by or more structures. Does that mean they could have multiple structures on the same lot?
It doesn't seem like it. That would be like a, like one of those places with the tiny houses. Like with the 4 tiny houses, but I haven't seen anyone building. that.
Well, and then, you know, I've seen people who maybe, I mean, the tiny home concept, I don't know what type of real estate you'd need to have that concept work, you know? I love the idea, like, we talk about friends or whatever, being able to do that. I love the idea of having that kind of availability. Do we have enough real estate in West Gateway to have that?
We already have a tiny house in Westwood. Same concept. I mean, except it's using.
There are other cons, you know, it's age restricted,
But the same concept without age restriction, that's nice, you have it. So you need a lot of language.
Also, the crazy requirements of COA, the units have to be fit to size that the units have to accommodate are too big to be met by tiny.
yeah, I mean, there's affordable by the code definition, and then there's affordable by
But the, but the,
industry
but
definition.
the square foot requirement that COA sets is just absurd.
I'm just talking about affordable, you know, for less than $1 million. So stay consistent. I mean,
So we're on pervious.
So, right now, impervious / permeable trees. Inside, and I see.
Item 6.
So currently impervious / permeable trees. Impervious trees, water can't get through them, is undefined when determining lot coverage. So I'll just read our definition currently. Lot coverage shall mean that an area of a lot covered by improvements of any type, which are highly resistant to infiltration by water, is to be expressed as a percentage. That highly resistant to be infiltrated by water is pretty vague. Currently, anytime anybody has permeable pavers or a crushed shell driveway or something like that, we don't consider that as lot coverage at all. So essentially somebody under this definition could come under, build their house and have permeable pavers across their entire lot. A city kind of is that in the budget a little bit by giving them credit towards using pervious, but still counts it towards their lot coverage. So they say that an area of a lot, their lot coverage definition is an area of a lot that is covered by buildings, structures, paved areas, paved areas, and materials used for patios, driveways, swimming pools, or similar facilities divided by the total area of the lot. provided the eaves, overhangs, and gutters up to maximum 23 inches shall not be included in lot coverage calculations. However, in the multiple zones, districts, when calculating lot coverage, the area covered by driveways, walkways, patios, non-roof decks of permeable construction, they specify water passes through and not off the surfaces, which is pretty clear, are credited for 50% towards lot coverage. So I just wanted that last sentence, districts when calculating lot coverage. That's a credit that they get down there. So I think we should include something
That's a great catch,
there.
because that would limit the size of the, potentially limit the size of the home.
Yeah, that's gonna help the home.
Right.
I don't understand why. I'm getting a little outside of myself right now, but, I would like to see some way to require patios and driveways and things around pools, whatever, to be pervious.
Like as a requirement.
Yes, like, why put it? With all this discussion about water and the need to, and drainage issues and, flooding, et cetera, make as much of your property pervious as possible. Now, in terms of, we obviously don't want an entire stone. We talked about this with vegetation or, you know,
We vegetative coverage.
yeah, so,
So
but again, getting into that credit for doing the right thing, I think the time has passed for that.
So the stone driveway in West Cape May counts as 100% impervious, and the Cape May too. So you would, is that bring size of the house, if you want that full size driveway.
Or it would also help with drainage.
Essentially, anything that's not grass or vegetation, mulch bed or something. So driveways, walkways, patios, non-roof decks. Whether they're of stone construction, permeable pavers, impervious concrete. They would get a credit, not a credit. It would count towards their lot coverage by 50%.
50%.
So really what you have is, you have 40% lot coverage. Okay, then you have a 45% vegetation. So there's 15% in the R1 that, wherever it is, that allows the contractors to use that extra 15% for pervious, because you only need 45% vegetation. So I don't even know where that 15% goes, or where it is.
Well, yes, you do.
I'm sorry.
Ultimately, you do have the numbers on what's being developed on the property, so.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it gives them an extra 15% on the lot coverage if they're using a pervious pavers or a pool to cover.
So to Nor's point, just to be clear, in the R1, it's the lot coverage, it's maximum lot coverage specifically, it says for principal and building and accessories. And then the vegetative requirement, overall vegetative coverage is 45%.
So it's 40% lot coverage.
40% lot coverage for principal buildings and accessories. It doesn't talk about driveways, it doesn't talk about any, sidewalk, it doesn't talk about anything other than the principal and accessories. And then 45% is the overall vegetative coverage requirement in the R1. So it's 5% difference.
So that 15% is pavers. It's probably pavers.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and
But of course, suburban's pavers, so they have to give all the drainage, calculations and all that kind of stuff, and plus it's picked up when, Tony's, final has built.
well, no, what we're saying here is if it's stone, it was always a 0, and that could be leading to part of our drainage issues. Part of, without our knowledge, we might not have been able to figure that out until this conversation. Does that make sense?
No.
Because if they're putting impervious material that has, or even that should be counted, at least it's 50%, if it's covering the lot and we haven't captured it for 15 years, there's a caveat there.
So like a paper currently, if it has like grass or sand around it, like on
Yeah.
Colgate now, those would be considered pervious papers and they get 100% credit for those. The water passes through them. Okay, great. Under Cape Mays, that would still be counted towards 50% of their lot coverage, utilizing those similar papers.
That's a way to.
But I agree, they count those turf stones as 50%.
Curb stone.
Yeah, the pavers like down the alley.
Pervious, permeable papers. Yeah. Grass
I
creek.
think they might.
Well, I would tell them like a landscaper.
Yeah, I think they might
So,
have
I mean, they're-
because grass goes right through.
Cape May.
Yeah, maybe a point too.
About how much the credit is for the permanent papers, papers and paper.
I thought it was 50% residential, not for commercial. But I also want to remind everyone, that the purpose of lot coverage is not just for frontage. It also regulates the intensity of the use. So even though you're just putting sort of permeable pavers down, you're also creating a parking lot in places where activities occur and all that, so. Just put it in your mind, I've had that. discussion before.
parking on these buildings. Space.
And that it's not coming to me right now, but, not encouraging the potencies, but not, having a lot coverage. Not 50% towards lot coverage. Not all the way, lots of coverage, what would that do? Not on the driveway, though.
Update the vegetation coverage.
That's
Increase
I mean, you have to have a driveway, right? Right,
Yes.
well,
No parking. No parking spots. You want people parking on the street. Driveways.
Ones that are close, they use the parking strips, so they're like, 2 foot wide. And they go all the way with with grass in the middle. So,
yeah, or parking strips, even those things can be pervious pavers or not, So there's still some room for
I'm sure they can, towards that coverage.
Yeah. So,
You could require all new stuff to be pervious.
Yeah.
As a requirement.
whether or not, and then you're saying Cape May, that's 50% counted towards lot coverage. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, that'd be a design standard. Section for
Well,
requiring.
But it's lot coverage too, right?
We could,
You make it a design standard, you're going to be requirements.
Yeah.
You want to be design standard, you want to be a zoning, right? Requirement, not buffer.
that you don't want to require all the new permits.
I did.
Or the design standard.
I'm not objective on this conversation.
You want, could you come on so we can, hear you through the
I think
microphone?
give you some things. I've been a real estate developer in construction for over 35 years.
This time we do ask for your name.
Okay, and I have this whole, you're fighting each other. What's your conversation about your pervious and impervious?
Name,
Lee Hajinsky, 409 Second Avenue.
can you spell that last?
CHUBZINSKI. Just on the one hand, you're saying you want to reduce the structure size. You accomplish that by having an impervious piece of driveway, because you restrict what's happening on the site. But what you're saying now, you're going to mandate impervious, but you'll give them 50% credit, then you're going to have more ability. Now, if they build the same size driveway. So you're fighting yourself and you're in your own argument. So just kind of figure that out, okay? Because you're about to make a decision, say everything, look, I'm an environmentalist, so. You know, I could have built anything I wanted on my property, but double lot. I just kept it small, single story, so I'm there. But you're fighting each other on your terms and on this conversation, so you really, just don't arbitrarily say it.
I think they were deciding whether they were gonna give a 50% credit for pervious, pavers.
Right,
And then someone said, well, we don't wanna do that. We'd rather count every piece of paving, whether it's pervious or impervious, against lot coverage. Therefore, they would have less lot coverage to work with on the house if they're using it up on the driveway. Because the purpose of giving the 50% credit and using pervious pavers is it allows them to have more coverage elsewhere on the property. So this group is deciding not to do that.
but if you put concrete down, it's.
That is-
it's
that is-
It's the same.
That's right. So it's 100%.
Right, and so you're not doing anything to restrict the size and structure of it. You're encouraging structure to be larger by giving you credit for impervious.
No.
As typically,
Hold on, let me make sure I understand you, because if I understand you, I disagree with you, I may not understand. So you have a driveway.
same size driveway, not.
A driveway.
Your parking is your
Driveway.
parking. It's
It's a.
cars and single size.
It's a 500 square foot driveway.
Right.
Okay? And I think what the board is deciding now is they have to put something there to drive the car over. In Cape Med, you could put in pervious pavers. And that 500 square foot driveway would only be 250 square foot of coverage. What this board is saying is we don't want to do that. We want to do it in a way that if they put a 500 square foot driveway, it's 500 square feet, and they can't make it 250 square feet by making it pervious.
Okay, so why would I put pervious pavers down when I'm in the driveway and it's less maintenance and have no difference?
That's right. And the board is making a decision, and I don't, this is policy, not.
I mean, I would,
The board is making a decision that they would rather deal with the drainage issue than have another 250 square foot of house.
so they're gonna say that, are they gonna mandate that they can't put the concrete in and they only can use?
No, they're not. They're gonna put concrete, they're gonna put concrete, and they're gonna force the drainage ordinance. That's it.
So you're not incentivizing any pervious materials.
No, see,
Right, that's what we're deciding.
Yeah, because it's a neutral effect on the structure size at the end of the day, because you're equivocating to.
It's not neutral.
It's, you, on the structure size, are they allowed,
You have 5,000 square feet to work with on lot coverage. Okay? If you allow pervious, 500 square foot driveways, only count at 250, okay, that leaves 9,750 square.
So what do I do with the extra square footage?
What's that?
What do I do with the extra square footage? If I'm a developer, what do I do with it? If I'm maximizing my profit, what do I do? I build a big.
I can't, arguing about math is going to be smart exercise.
So then, Rex,
it's so wire pervious. A pervious driveway.
I think it's the right thing. I mean, I won't study it, so I'm fine. But,
Take your habits.
well, the issue really is that as a builder, as a developer, if you're telling me you're giving me an extra 250 square feet or 2,500 square feet or whatever the number is in lot coverage because I'm using pervious pavers, I'm gonna build a bigger building. Because that's where my money is. My money is not my parts, my money is this building.
You have, you're thinking we're adding stuff by doing pervious, that's not what's going on. If you have a 5,000 square foot lot and it's 40% lot coverage, you have 2,000 feet of lot coverage. That is a fixed number, okay? So you have 2,000 square feet of lot coverage. If you allow that driveway, that 500 square foot driveway, to only count as 250 square feet of lot coverage, that means that you have 1,750 feet to build a house with. Okay, you get it? You hear
You're
that?
not reducing the number, but then why would I use pervious?
Because
You
it's
wouldn't.
wire.
But that's not, they're making a decision whether or not they wanna have to give people more house to work with if they use impervious pavers. So they're making a policy decision. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but Cape May has said, you know what? In order to improve the drainage, we'll let you do 50%, and that's what they do. So that 2,000 square feet you have to work with actually becomes, you're not
No,
using it up, no, it doesn't, you're just not using it up.
Well, if it's available to me as a developer, I'm gonna put it in structure.
If you're cross-referenced in like
Well, that's like, just a developer, you're putting it back in my contract. They're getting $1,000 a foot.
I guess I'd have to draw a chart to explain it, but I'm not doing it. If you have 2,000 square feet to work with,
Right.
and you need to have a 500 square foot driveway to park a car, you need to have it, you have to have it, okay? What this board is saying, and I'm not taking a position on it, they're saying that we're gonna make you use the whole 500 feet, no matter what kind of paver you put. When you use cement or paver, you're using 500 of your lot coverage for that driveway.
So what's the discussion on the credit? You're just saying there's no credit.
What I'm saying is, Cape May would let you use impervious paver.
All
You
right,
get a credit, so then you wouldn't be using 500 of your lot coverage on the driveway, you'd only be using 200.
You know, if you're trying to encourage drainage, but
I-
if I can use.
Sir, I understand that, but I'm telling
I'm
you,
using concrete as a building.
okay, I get that if what the goal is to encourage drainage, then yes, it's not a good decision. If your goal is to make people have less space to build houses, then it's a perfectly fine decision.
Well, so that's why I'm fighting each other.
We're not fighting each other.
The drain better,
All right,
so the
so
other side of the extra sizes.
I've explained it as well as I can. That's the.
I said that there was, possible and FAR requirements for the actual building structure.
If you're putting FAR requirements on residential housing, or it's
No, it's, you know, our areas for the resident.
It's only on residential.
Those sizes already exist, separate from lot coverage.
you allow additional square footage calculations on FAR.
No,
The pro, well, that's what FAR is.
and we're getting, we don't allow extra,
Okay, all right, well,
Except porches.
except porches.
well,
But we don't allow.
FAR in real estate terms is your right to do more square footage based on the ground coverage. It's a calculation that's occurred, and that's the standard. So you might be using the wrong term when you're using FAR.
What do you think FAR stands for?
It's your area of recovery, because there you go on. Okay, it's how much, if you give out, if you have so much ground area, they give you a credit for how much square footage you can build in a structure, which are FAR, because of where, how it's zoned, the zoning has certain FAR parameters. So, if, you know, I don't know what they are, but I've never.
That's correct.
I've single family homes, I've never.
That last point was correct.
Yeah.
Your last point was correct. So you said there's certain restrictions in building, including FAR. And now we're talking about lot coverage, which is totally different, and that's where the driveway brought it. So it's two separate.
Well, I'm getting, the bottom line for me is he made a comment earlier on and said, he'll get back to the 25 feet. I wanted to know what that was. It was one of my axes that grinds that in 2008. Prior to 2008, we had 25 foot between structures. And in 2008, this, not necessarily people here, but this board changed it to benefit the developers after the real estate crush. And it's never been changed back. Obviously, the 25 feet between structures limits your structure size, also allows for the breezeway for the air to get through between structures.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
So I don't know why we never reverted back to 25 feet between structures. Because now I think it's something you get 6 foot on one side or 10 foot on the other, some, and then you get 6. That was a benefit that was given as a recovery in 2008. And it's never been taken back.
That's great, greatly helpful. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Okay.
That's a huge. I didn't know that.
Decided you had those done.
You said it was the last master plan? So that's something that we could review,
We tried yard setbacks, but.
right? So that would actually help what we're all talking about.
Pulling back in.
I'm getting tired. Anyone?
Where are we at?
Oh, we're not to make motions.
We are on page 5, number 6.
I think towards the, I'm done. I'm done.
You're good.
I'll listen to the next, what's it?
So, finish 6, make sure you finish 6, and we can pick up with 7.
Get back to the first 15 minutes.
Something,
So our next meeting is on May sixth. It's a regular meeting, but right now I don't have any applications. There's potentially gonna be one application on that. So we can certainly come back to this if you guys are opposed or if you would like to wait. So the work session, it's up to you. But you will have, probably some revision.
that sounds like a plan.
Great.
There you go.
No, that sounds like, we don't have an application or we have a short application, we can pick this up with number 7.
Starting number 6 again.
Maybe,
I don't think.
that's fine. That's fine.
It'll give everyone.
Adjusted,
Totally
yeah, because
that.
it's different than what I read the last time we had a bunch of stuff.
I added a lot.
I actually read that too. So, if there's, anyone else from the public that would like to come up and speak, got anything, come up, sir? So is this any different? This is the same.
You're saying, yeah, oh.
Yeah.
Thanks, but it's the same as you said. Okay, this is, I can get rid of this, one you handed out last.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm here to talk about your favorite topic. The sewers on Second Avenue. Prior to this meeting, I was on the fence about sewers. And when I came down this year, I see that we had 2 new 3,000 square foot homes in the bill with septics. 5 in the last 2 years in our area. But yet your new code says you need an acre to have a septic. And these are being put on 50-foot by 100-foot lots. At what point do we recognize that sewers are needed on Second Avenue? If you're going to permit 2,500, 3,000 square foot homes be built. And that's what's happening.
This is a commissioner, this isn't this board. This is a commissioner issue, I believe. This isn't planning and zoning, this
No,
is.
it is planning and zoning because you're putting a 10-year plan together. And in the 10-year plan, it's been suggested that the sewers be addressed on Second Avenue as part of that plan. Nobody's saying do it today.
Well, I
But
think,
we are saying that we would like to have it put into the 10-year plan because it makes a difference what happens on our lot.
I think we did address that at a work session a couple meetings ago, and there were no changes.
What's no changes means you're not gonna do anything. You don't see a problem. You don't think you're introducing a problem by having gray water spilling off
First off,
homes that are double the size of what they are now.
this isn't,
And multiplying it down the bottom, that's not creating a problem.
So we do have on the very first page of the master plan revision, which is now online, that there is some information about infrastructure, water and sewer. And the planning board recommendation from the past, and obviously we talked about it, page 1. The borough will continue to maintain, replace or upgrade what is existing, or rather than expand the borough's water and sewer infrastructure, which could lead to overdevelopment. So that is why you're here to talk.
Okay, but obviously Second Avenue doesn't have sewers.
Well,
So, and it's excluded from your statement, from your decision, it's excluded.
no, it's not a decision. This is just a.
Well, this was from your statement, it's excluded.
Okay.
But yet you're permitting, I mean, and I'm not, this isn't your building guys here, you're permitting these larger homes to be built. And people are putting in these septic systems, which, great. But would you want all 60 of us to do that? I can tell you, I follow the environmental reports that you've developed over the last 25 years, which you've got your funding based on. I can tell you, Second Avenue is constantly a sensitive area. It's constantly, the aquifer is sensitive. There's some kind of frog or something that lives there that's dead surface. And they go, yeah, it's okay that we're gonna allow these houses to keep on building larger and larger, and I'm not, you can walk, drive down, or I come down, there's one going up right now, 2 doors away. So either we're gonna address the sewage, or we're gonna allow everybody to build 3,000 square foot homes with septics, and we'll pay the $70,000-$100,000 for the septic systems, and we'll pollute the ground. That's the decision.
Well, isn't there another consideration is not, which you've heard a lot today, which is also in the master plan, is addressing the size of the homes that are built.
The argument there is the 50-foot lots.
But there's a septic, a house with a septic being put in on a 50 by 100-foot lot. It wouldn't be allowed by the county.
Yes, it did. Okay, it did. There was, I'll tell you the argument.
There's two issues. If you're saying we have a lot size for septic neighborhoods, that's not, that 35,000 square foot requirement is set by the state of New Jersey. What it does is it says that we cannot create a new lot of anything less than 35,000 square foot in outside the sewer service area. Don't confuse that with the county permitting a septic system to be built on an existing lot of smaller than 35,000 square feet. And the county health department requires that those systems meet modern standards of nitrate. So the idea that a new system is going to pollute the ground, I think is not.
We're 50-foot lots, some of them are 45 foot lots, right? I happen to have a 100-foot lot, so I don't have an issue. Okay, my neighbors move aside of it. Okay, so all these 50-foot and 45-foot lots are all going to put in these big systems that go basically the width of the property. Because that's.
They already have.
What they're not all, and some of them have ones that are grandfathered back, go back 30 years. So they're not.
Grandfathered back 30 years, I'm 30 years old.
Well, they're 30 years old.
Right, I'm just replacing them.
Okay, so what, by not doing the sewer, or even entertaining sewers, and it's in your plan.
Because we can offer a solution to the homeowner.
Okay, your solution was for us to pay for it.
With
That makes sense. And I'm getting a little hot now, because I'll tell you what, 6 years ago, my neighbor and I offered, came to this bench, said, I'll tell you what, we want to put sewers in. Can we connect to Columbia? And we're willing to pay for it. And we were told no. We were told there were technical reasons it couldn't happen. Okay? But yet, at the meeting last year, Remington and Verdict, right, you said you can do it. Okay, we were willing to pay for it. We were willing to pay for it. We were willing to take the line and send it a third of the way down Second Avenue through the alley. We would have paid for that, and we were told no. Okay, so.
more recently, you were offered a solution and
No,
and it was rejected.
that wasn't,
Last
that's not.
It was a solution. Sewer, the borough would it's it, and then it was rejected. So.
Well, I don't know, it was rejected by the board, but the neighborhood. It was rejected because you said we had to pay for it. You didn't tell us how much it was going to be. You didn't say what all the soft costs were on it. You didn't say nothing. So it wasn't if you came to us and said, hey, it's going to cost you $100,000 a household. No, you left it open-ended off.
Sir, I don't tell you, but I will tell you that I talked to them exactly what the price was going to be. Somebody would have been this exact $1,000. That's it was 1.6 million dollars for the whole project, which we were hoping to get a USDA grant through. So, and it could have gotten potentially 30%. That's usually what we get as grants from USDA. They'll give us a grant through 30%, the rest is a loan. So the remaining amount was the amount that was given as an estimate. So 68 divided by 68 houses over 1,000 years, and that's the number.
How much? That's not what I can promise you that. He's exactly 70,000. And that's not what I see here. It's not what I came here
So, okay,
to put it on the 10-year plan.
we have, you believe the 10-year plan that says we're not charging sewer, say something different about Second Avenue. I got that. That's a legitimate point. It's in the minutes. I'm sure it is now, and they have it.
And that's what my point was that what's happening now, what is being allowed to happen, if you're not doing sewers, you're encouraging everybody to just, the horse is out of the barn. Development's gonna happen there. So the options are, with the prices that are happening now, we're talking $1 million per home. A builder can afford to pay $60,000-$70,000 for a septic system. So you're gonna have a street full of septic systems all over down there. That's what it's gonna be. Environmental perspective, do you want 70 houses of regular spills into the aquifer? I don't.
Once the water's processed, what?
Processed by who?
By the septic system, what are you talking about? It's on-site processing, that's what the county requires.
It flows out and filters through the sand. Right? That's what it does, right? Am I wrong? The gray water flows out, so if I'm using whatever detergent I'm using, or somebody uses turpentine and puts it down their laundry cell. What that, well, I can't argue with people, they wash their paintbrushes, I can't argue that. What's going into the gravy? That's what's happening. Okay, so if you want that multiplied by a whole, that's what's gonna happen. I mean, that's down the line.
Sir, this was addressed by the commissioners and the price, I was at those meetings. And the price they gave is accurate.
Nobody said $23,000.
I would be happy to meet with you.
It's not been happening, $23,000. Okay, because at the time.
And it was
against
free out.
Of
And it was interest
the.
free out. It was
Well, anyways, but part of planning is 10 years, consider sewers, because this is the way it's gonna go.
And right
The
now,
the development takes its own course. Money talks, it happens. We see what's happening over West Cape and now. The reason it's happening is because the builders and developers are getting in the way. It's gonna happen. It's just what's gonna happen.
well, thank you, sir. And have you filled out a survey?
I did actually, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And you see all those are on here, so.
Anyone else have anything? Oh, yeah, second.
I don't believe it's.
Here's you go.